Hello, my name's Hamish Renton, Managing Director of HRA Global.
This episode, it's all about the beer. Okay, there's an odd foray into wine, but all about the beer. 3 stellar guests, A-listers for you.
Good morning, pleasure to meet you. I'm Ben Lockwood. I've been working for Brewdog for the last 2 years as the on-trade marketing manager here in the UK. Obviously, it's a challenging environment with the on-trade shut for the last 12 months or so. But prior to that, I spent 12 years at Mitchells and Butlers across operations, marketing and procurement. So I started there at the White Horse Parsons Green, doing lots of fun things with beer and drinks in general. And then I was lucky enough to be Nicholson's marketing manager for 4 years, looking after cask ale and everything drink. And then I progressed from there to 4 years looking after beer and cider from a buying perspective. So a lot of fun and some interesting times within beer and cider in the on-trade.
Yeah, fantastic. Great experience there. And Dom, give us your background then.
Yeah, hi, my name is Dom South. I'm an independent marketing consultant. My business is Brand Fitness Limited. But prior to that, got extensive experience in the beer world. I was marketing director at Green King for 9 years, working predominantly in their brewing business, but also some good time spent managing and working on their pub business and retail restaurant business too. Prior to that, I've always been in food and drink. So I was working for PepsiCo. I suppose my claim to fame there was relaunching the Monster Munch brand as it is now. And also worked in confectionery with Linton Sprungli, and before that with McVitie's and KP Snacks. So lots of food and drink background.
Hi, Fran Bridgewater from Drinks Network. I tend to wear different hats. My background has always been luxury FMCG. I am a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing. I build brands. I specialise nowadays in English sparkling wine. And the latest little hat I'm wearing is an idea I had between Christmas and New Year that has now rocketed and become Wine Jobs GB, which is finding work for those currently out of work across UK wine and UK hospitality. That's me.
Fantastic. So an all-star cast. Let's get our teeth into the first key question. Really is how is trade out there, particularly in the brewing world? So I'm going to direct this to you, Ben. Really, what sort of a COVID has Brewdog had?
Yeah, I mean, there's no getting away from the fact it's been tough, especially when you look at the on-trade. But I guess the thing to consider is where, overnight we had 104 bars just closed globally when the first lockdown came and the pandemic kind of really started. So we lost all that revenue, and the first thought really just turned to protecting jobs and making sure there was a business there at the end of it. We then got the restrictions lifted in July, and so we got a little bit of on-trade business. But I guess at the back of that, the positives or the green shoots that have enabled us to kind of build to the future and look ahead rather than looking back and just focusing on health and survival is e-commerce has gone through the roof and the off-trade business went really well. Now, those two combined don't offset.
Ben, has your e-commerce been direct to consumer or through the malts or through the specialist platforms? What's it been?
The e-commerce is direct to consumer.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so it really rocketed, and you're doing previous year's volumes in a month on there, which just shows you how much it's grown. And what an untapped opportunity is going forward as well.
Yeah, no, great. Dom, have you seen that from any of your clients that direct to consumers taken off in quite that magnitude?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to echo what Ben said, my experience with a lot of my clients were in brewing when the first lockdown happened, and I was introduced to the word and term furlough by some of my clients when I realised they weren't going to be working anymore. So it was a bit of a surprise, and obviously it's been a tough time. But at the same time, some parts of the industry have boomed, like you say. And I mean, I actually took Green King into e-commerce probably 9 years ago. And it trickled along. We grew it. It grew pretty well. It was a profitable channel, but we never pushed it. And then as over the last couple of years, it was something we started to put a lot of investment into, time, effort, actually had a focused resource on growing it. And I think it was a good move because as lockdown happened, I wasn't in the business at the time, but I know that team were the one part of the team that weren't furloughed. And that's because it was a full-time and some job to make sure orders were going out of the door, and they grew phenomenally. So absolutely, e-commerce has been a really key part part of the business.
Yeah, fantastic. And Ben, your e-commerce, are you dispatched from your depot, or do you use a third-party fulfillment? How do you do it?
No, we've got a hop hub, as we call it, up in Scotland. So we've got a warehouse facility that we use to and then we've got a couple of partners as well.
And how about the wine trade, Fran? Are you seeing more direct-to-consumer kicking off in the wine trade?
Yeah, in a very big way. What's really interesting, actually, Hamish, is during first lockdown, the stats, the demographics coming in was us Brits were the only ones drinking our best wine in our cellars. Most other countries were keeping their best for when lockdown was over and they could dine with their friends, show off, enjoy it, and shared company. Us Brits are saying, actually, I've had that in my cellar for years. I'm going to drink it right now. So what we're seeing in wine now is really interesting. There's a trading up. Profiles are basically people are really, really interested in the next step, or if not a few steps up. People are spending £25 a bottle quite happily for an evening, Friday night, Saturday night at home, because we're not dining.
Sure.
So yeah, the category has suffered, but also it's anyone that can do direct to consumer, and it's amazing the dreadful word pivot that we hear everywhere the whole time. Anyone that's pivoted fast and pivoted well and sympathised with the consumer. Anyone that's if they were doing an advert of a party on a beach somewhere, that's not going to cut it at the moment. So consumers want relevant. They want to see a face mask on, or they want, like Amazon. I mean, Amazon is brilliant. The Amazon smile.
Yeah.
So yeah, wine's really interesting. It'd be interesting to see what happens on the investment side of fine wine as well, because generally what I'm hearing is that consumers want the fine dining experiences back. They want curated wine lists and meals combined so that it's a super experience, and they're prepared to pay top dollar for it.
Ben, if I can flip it back to you, in terms of what you've seen go through the multiples then, so have you seen an uptick in sales through the multiples to compensate in part for the off-trade?
Yeah, so the off trade's been in pretty good growth. So the myth is that if you combine the on trade and the off trade, I think there's only wine that's in a positive growth number. All the other categories are down, so it just shows you that it's the growth in the off trade isn't offsetting what we're losing in pubs and bars and restaurants. But we have seen a growth, and Brewdog's outperformance has been about 30 to 40% ahead of craft and ahead of mainstream beer, which is phenomenal. But I think it's just a testament to some of the work that we've been doing on community, the work we did in creating 500,000 bottles of hand sanitizer, just taking a really community approach to getting through the pandemic in the early days, and that's kind of run true through the off-trade sales.
Are you seeing a switch towards more craft beer, or are you seeing IPA, or are you seeing particular flavours happening, or are we basically drinking the same that we were drinking last year, except it's just different channels?
We're drinking better. So it's been a massive opportunity for people to spend a little bit more on their beer choices and actually dive into craft potentially for the first time. The one big trend that has taken off in the last 12 months is the 440ml can. So actually it's the fastest growing format in craft, which is great. Some of those beers are a bit punchier in ABV, so that's been a massive trend. The other one to consider, and we might talk about this later, is just low and no alcohol, which kind of died down a little bit at the start, and then I think people realised they couldn't continue their drinking habits of the first 6 weeks of lockdown, and then I think it saw triple-digit growth for a month or so. So there's definitely been an uptake. I think craft beer and premium world lager are the two categories that are tracking ahead of all the others, and mainstream is the one it's had growth, but it's not had the growth that the more premium categories have had.
No, that's really good. Dom, can I flick that to you and see what you've seen from both with your sort of former on-trade hat on and with your clients right now?
I think there's been I've studied obviously the impact the pandemic's had on all sorts of categories, but obviously a keen observer of beer. And, nearly every single time I keep coming back to say the same thing, which is that it's not necessarily changed everything. It's just accelerated a heck of a lot of stuff. So and then in terms of beer, it's the same. One of the interesting observations, if you just stand and actually watch shoppers in supermarkets, beer and alcohol is at the end of the shop. And because people have suddenly been pushed into doing one big weekly shop because of the pandemic, beer's become a real casualty of that, because you can't often fit 12 beers into your super. And I think it is why a lot of volume and demand has moved online for delivery and and to the beer clubs online. It's also really interesting. We were seeing a trend towards cans away from bottles because consumers are buying cans because of sustainability and wanting to do a little bit for the environment, and they believe and it's right that they're more recyclable. But it's also true that it's easier to put them in your basket without them all kind of rolling around and smashing.
You guys see much happen in cider, the same sort of shift towards sort of higher end value?
I think there's been a little bit. I saw something, I think it was it might have been yesterday or a few days ago, that was from Weston's that just showed the growth of rosé cider, how it had gone from, don't quote me on the numbers here because I just quickly glanced at a report, but it was something like 7 million value to 47 million value. It was that kind of shift. And I think that's been driven by the off-trade, and I think they've got Henry Weston's Vintage Rosé, which is a big brand, as I'm sure you all know. So I think rosé and fruit. The interesting thing that I've not seen any insight on is that there was a prediction that fruit cider would overtake apple by about 2022, 2023.
Are you finding that the hard seltzer, that's the category that's going up massively? Jancis Robinson predicted in her New Year predictions list 2 years ago that hard seltzers would be massive last year, and because of lockdown they weren't, but I think this year they suddenly are, because they're an alternative. They're a harder core version of the fruit cider. They're not, because they're spirit based.
The other nuance to hard seltzers is from a calorie perspective, they're as skinny as you can do really, and yet contain ethanol. So on my mental model will be people are having a couple of those of an evening, trying to watch their weight, get a bit more, and they're smaller serve as well.
So I think from a hard seltzer perspective, obviously it's erupted in the US the last 3 years or so. So I think it's worth 4.5 billion now. It was 4.1 billion at the last week. 4.5. Everybody's getting into it. I even saw Heineken's new CEO in the Financial Times today saying that they're now late to the party but coming into hard seltzer. The difference between there and the UK is that they have a light beer category, which is where hard seltzer stole a lot of its volume from. So Miller Lite, Bud Light, Coors Light. Yeah. We don't drink Coors Light because it's a light beer. It's just another 4% lager that's a bit more premium than Carling and Carlsberg. So we don't have the natural category to steal from. So I think it's worth 4.1 million in the off trade, but it really needs the on trade to allow that sponsorship at festivals, sampling, getting people to understand it. And I think if things open up, I think hard seltzer will start to go off like a train.
Fundamentally, right now it's an out of home consumption, isn't it? It's a sort of park, picnic, hike, festival, whatever. That's the occasion. Can you see it on draft or in bottle or on the on trade?
I was speaking to the founder and owner of Bodega Bay, who got a really good deal with Molson Coors on that as their kind of route to market. And I think they were predicting, and again, it was passing conversation, so it was something like he's changed his numbers from being maybe 90% off trade and 10% on to being a bit more ambitious in the on trade. Because if you can get the serve right, there's an opportunity to put hard seltzer into long drinks and signature serves. There's a mindful category, so rather than putting a full fat tonic into something or a full fat Coke, you could mix something with hard seltzer and a low calorie spirit, and you've got a mindful drink there under a certain category of the menu. So I think there's a lot of work to do for hard seltzer in the on trade. We're very different to the US, but if you go around the US, every tap room is dedicating a couple of taps to hard seltzer now. So it's just an opportunity to bring new drinkers into your venue.
What about the other two variants that I've long had an eye on, which is hard kombucha and alcoholic tea? I mean, maybe Dom, I could bring you in on that. Are you seeing any action, any thinking, any experimentation in that patch?
Yeah, I'm actually a founder in the fermented food space, actually.
Plug away.
Personally passionate about and know a lot about. This is health and wellness trend, just kind of driving demand for new and different products and low alcohol beers, hard seltzer, with low calorie, and then followed by hard kombucha. But we're going to see kvass with beetroot and all sorts of crazy flavors. Then we're going to see kefirs, and then we'll probably see hard kefirs. I mean, I think this is just not going to stop for some time, and it's going to get constantly new and different. And what we'll really see is the merger of health and wellness with taste exploration, which is really the two trends driving the alcohol market and the craft beer market. So it's going to be exciting, and it's going to continue to evolve. And when the craft brewers get their hands on those products and work out how to do them without cross-contaminating their own core product, which is really the challenge. You'll see some amazing stuff, I think.
And are we just going to absorb the American flavours, the White Claw palette, if you like, or are we going to go in a slightly different direction, do you think?
So we've got no history, so we can probably do whatever we want. In the way that the Americans did with craft beer. They had no history, so they went and started doing whatever they wanted. So it'll be interesting to see. Any hard seltzer brand you speak to is probably their dark fruit one that's getting most of the share. I saw that Truly, which is the kind of rival to White Claw in the US, their hard tea about 6 weeks ago, and it's already taken 7% share of the total hard seltzer category in its first 6 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see who gets involved in that and who tries to have a go at it in the UK. But once things open up over here, I think you'll see a fast track of NPD in that category and loads of people chomping at the bit to get involved.
But I think also you've got to look to trends in food and new ingredients that consumers are buying as well. And I think in the UK, we're not always identical to America, although we're influenced and led a bit by America. So I think, the yuzu and various new fruits, and we're going to also see all sorts of things like that emerge and hit the scene. So it'll be a bit of both.
We're liking things less sweet. That's part of the health and wellness thing as well. The more they can cut sugars out, where the American taste on hard seltzers is much more sugar intensive. I think over here, I don't know whether you guys agree, what I'm seeing in the wine category is that we're all managing that the champagnes, a lot of grower champagnes are going brut nature now. You normally need a somm to talk you through it and to say, have this, it'll be absolutely perfect with your blini, with smoked salmon, with the caviar on top, whatever else. But not necessarily so much on its own. They say it's a harder sell, but Prosecco is going straight in on that category. And it's fascinating. There's a change. There's an appetite for umami flavours as opposed to sweet in this country. I think that's the difference.
All this innovation, all this kind of move to wellness, lower sugar, more fermentables, more kind of intelligent flavourings. Are you getting the sense that the retail trade is dialing into that? How far in advance are they doing their category buying right now? And are they receptive to this? Or do they sort of want it proven by the on-trade and then they'll pile in? How are they responding?
I think the challenge in the on-trade particular right now is that the only focus is getting open.
Yeah.
Anything around range changes and trends is probably at the bottom of the list right now. So here at Brewdog, we're kind of less conversations about product and range and more conversations about what you need from us on day one.
Yeah, got it.
We can get consumer confidence back and we can get open, and it doesn't look like another lockdown's on the horizon. At that point, we can then start thinking, okay, how can we enhance what's on your bar to delight the new consumer? And we talk about conscious consumer, and that's kind of been a trend for 4 years. But I think they're now more conscious than ever, and they're conscious about where they go, what brands they align to, who they interact with, how much they drink, what the ABV of what they drink, and then also sustainability, which is a huge one. So it's big. I think it's just we need to be open first, and then we can start having those conversations. Off-trade retailers are obviously always about how can you cater for as many people as possible through your choice, just to enhance the basket spend. So they're really hot on it, and I think the eruption of craft beer in the last kind of 4 or 5 years in the supermarkets just shows you how they can get behind the trend. They can go big really quickly, and they can kind of make or break a certain trend, I suppose. They backed hard seltzer in a big way. I know some of them are looking at could they have aisles that are entitled B Corp suppliers and things like that. So
the other thing probably that the indies in particular are finding at the moment, and they're looking forward to the on-trade taking some heat off them so they can breathe, reassess all their categories as and when we get day one back in the on-trade, and just it'll balance again. I don't think it'll ever go back to where it was, but I think it'll balance out and probably give them a breather. What are your thoughts, Tom?
The retailers adopt new trends when they're just at the point they're going to go mainstream. And for example, I remember in 2015 sort of talking with the board in the brewery about the fact that sour was the next big kind of trend emerging. But when you look at the data, sour is so niche, it's unbelievable in beer, even though it's absolutely the next trend. And it's still, even now, I would argue, one of the key next flavour profiles or trends that are coming through. And I've been drinking them for 5 years, but it's still not big enough for the trade to sort of recognise it as a category or a sector like they can with an India Pale Ale. if you look on Google and you look at analytics and you look at kind of what consumers are searching for, sour as a flavour profile across food categories is starting to take off and is starting to feature in NPD and new product development. And so I predict still that it's going to take off and become bigger and bigger, but it takes a decade for these tiny, tiny trends to need to be adopted by retailers because they're still small.
What about the online platforms, so your Ocados and your Amazons, and also, your Majestics and those kind of online wholesalers? Are they quicker to the party, do you feel, or are they still waiting to have evidence of demand before they give the supply?
I think retailers with online platforms or with dark stores where shelf space is not quite the same conundrum they've got to manage as a bricks and mortar store are able to introduce ranges that are a bit more forward thinking. So you see that online with the beer clubs, they're selling these things far more proactively than perhaps the trade that needs to measure every square foot and look at the value it delivers. So yeah, I think they're ahead, and that's where you can often see these trends coming through. Plus their consumers are more likely to be the consumers that are exploring and looking for harder to find beers.
I wanted to talk about low and no. I don't think we can have any discussion around beer and cider in this world without talking about that. To what extent is that going to be the future? And I guess I want to drill into who's buying it and why are they buying it?
We had so much momentum heading into the first lockdown. Alcohol-free beer in Spain it's got 13% share. It's only got 1.5 in the UK. Now, okay, there's different cultural elements to that, but it just shows the size of the opportunity. Brewdog, Nanny State came out in 2013 and regularly was kind of number 5, number 6 in total 10 craft beer brands, regardless of alcohol. And then we brought out Punk AF, and that was the fastest growing NPD within craft beer, regardless of alcohol. So the market's there, and the people that are drinking it's everyone. And you've still got a section of people who still don't know that alcohol-free beer doesn't taste like a dusty bottle of Caliber off the shelf, not in the fridge. But then you've got a huge amount of people that are aware of these brands, and this isn't about people who are abstaining from alcohol. This is about people who just don't want to drink as much as they were. They still want to have alcohol, but you know what? If you're going out after work and you're enjoying the social occasion, do you want to have that 3rd or 4th pint, or would you just rather have something non-alcoholic but stay out with your work colleagues or your friends? And I think what Low and No is going to do, especially the younger demographic, is facilitate an on-trade occasion a lot more than what we might see. And post-COVID is going to be huge because consumer confidence might be pretty low. But what's going to make you feel confident is, I can go out and not drink, but I can still see people, be aware of what's going on, make sure I'm safe. And then go home and get in the car at the end of the day. So I think Low and No is huge.
The thing that's driving low alcohol in my mind is younger consumer. It is everyone, but it's absolutely been driven more and more so by younger consumers going to uni and being teetotal or not drinking or moderating significantly versus perhaps when I went to university. And and they're demanding all sorts of different drinks, and they're walking into bars where, and in their mind, it's cool to order a non-alcoholic drink, whereas perhaps 2 decades ago it wasn't cool to order a non-alcoholic drink. So that means they will start demanding really interesting, tasty drinks, and they're going to come from, as we've just said earlier, different types of fermentation, whether that's kombucha or kefir or kvass or beer. And I think for me, the one thing I wanted to add to this is just to say that when you look at low alcoholic beers or drinks that are a sort of a version of their parent brands, so where there's already an established product in the market that's got alcohol, they're always a compromise. Whereas when you look at brands that establish themselves because that's the space they specialize in, I'll give an example being Big Drop Brewing Company, who don't do any alcoholic beer. They just brew great low alcohol beer. That for me is where there is no taste compromise, and building a brand out and to own its space is really how I think that category is going to develop in the longer run. What
will the on-trade look like this time next year and then in 3 years' time? Can we maybe, I'll fling that to you first, Dom. So this time next year, and then in 36 months' time, what is the on-trade going to look like? Fascias, attendance, volumes, chains. How's it going to feel to you?
Well, I say it with my fingers crossed, but this time next year, I hope it's back with a big bang, and we're still in the middle of that big bang. And I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to welcome back customers and put on a show. And I think that will be a really spectacular and fun time to be going back to the pub. So I think that's going to happen, with the caveat that there are now going to be rules around going to the pub, and we're going to have to play by a new set of rules. But I think we'll learn to do that.
Paper menus are going to vanish. This is the thing, isn't it? This is one of the new things, is they're saying there will be no paper. Everything will be contactless, so we'll be on devices ordering.
Yeah, I think you're right, Fran. I think in 3 years' time, I think we will, and I say this with mixed emotion, we will use pubs in a slightly different way. Things like table service, things like technology to order your drinks with, things like sitting outside in teepees and bars and outdoor bars and marquees may be the norm, but I think they'll have done it in a way that makes it an even bigger and better experience. So I don't think the pub's going to go away. In fact, it will come back stronger, but I think it will be a bit different.
What's going to be key for the on-trade, and people might forget this, is that we're the most COVID secure venues out of lockdown, but yet we were the first ones to close. So I think when we get back open under no restriction, we can very, very quickly give consumers the confidence to come out. So I know at Brewdog, the retail guys, they the kind of service cycle and the plan of like how do you introduce these these new social distancing guidelines and all the rules and everything, but take away the interaction and engagement with the team. Sure. So we made everything super safe, and we've been kind of given audits for how well we made the venues safe, and people have actually visited them and said, you know what, you've done a great job, guys. But we also increased 10 new customer to team engagement points. So we made the venues super, super safe and gave consumers that confidence, but we also didn't strip back the element of what people enjoy about going out, and engaging with the team is one of those elements. I'd much rather a team member tell me what their beer of the day is or their dish of the day than be on a pay-to-go app and just have something flashing at me. The ones that win will be the ones that take the best of the technology and also invest in their team and their customers.
And then, Fran, I mean, from your perspective, how do you see the online blending with the on-trade?
Yeah, I think the role of the SOM is just going to be absolutely massive. I think now people are starting to understand what a SOM does, so that when they're looking at a wine list, they're not going, I'll have the Malbec, please, because they haven't got the guts to say, I love Malbec. Tell me something like it that's gutsier. Tell me about Tanat from Uruguay, for example. Never heard of that. Tell me, will it go with the steak that I'm eating, etc. I think curated experiences is the way forward. And I think wine tourism is going to be huge. It's the experience. It doesn't matter whether it's on trade and you're going to be going and sitting in a teepee in the middle of a field. You want to be able to say to your mates, we're back after lockdown and we have done this and this is incredible. And I'm going to stay in a tree house that I'm going to sit in a hot tub that overlooks the vineyards. So, I mean, what's better, drinking the wine that's been produced from the vineyard? That's what people want.
On that note of heading towards the sunlit uplands, I want to thank Dom South, I want to thank Ben Lockwood and Fran Bridgewater. Guys, the all-star cast, thank you very much for this. So thank you very much for your time.
It's been lots of fun.